is a warning to the world. Venezuela is a guinea pig. Venezuela is a trial ground, and one waits to see what the other powers are going to do about it. Russia, China, one would also say India can do something about it. Brazil, President Lula has already spoken quite firmly. But beyond speaking firmly, beyond convening urgent meetings of regional bodies and UN bodies, what else can be done? Because the United States is the United States, military power. But what I can read is that the Third World War is already being fought in piecemeal, and hopes that no mistake is made and that no nuclear power triggers a nuclear device. 3rd day of January, the year 2026 will go down in history because of the dramatic manner in which Nicolas Maduro was plucked out of his residence in Caracas in Venezuela. But this is not without precedent. And in any event, the Americans had already indicated through President Trump that they were thinking of this very act when the president said that they were conducting covert activities inside of Venezuela. And when they positioned one of their most sophisticated seagoing vessels in the Caribbean, it was quite clear that it was just a matter of time. And what this tells us is that we have a rehash of the Monroe Doctrine. Many who are students of history will remember on the 2nd day of December, it was in 1823, the then President of the United States, James Monroe, while addressing Congress, stated or made a statement that then became known as the Monroe Doctrine. At that time, the target were the European powers who were engaged in colonization. Today, we can actually talk about the Trump Doctrine. And the Trump Doctrine, when I think about it, reminds me of an event on the 30th day of September, 1862, Otto von Bismarck, when he told the Prussian parliament that the issues of the day will not be resolved by resolutions and speeches, but by blood and iron. The Trump Doctrine is that the issues of the day will not be resolved by speeches and resolutions, but by missiles and drones and warships. And this is gunboat diplomacy at its very best.
Discussed analysis. Political commentator PLO Lumumba breaks down what he characterizes as the United States strategic campaign against Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, situating the struggle within a broader narrative of U.S. foreign policy, resource competition, and global power dynamics. At the heart of Lumumba's argument lies a stark interpretation. The recent dramatic actions taken by the U.S. against Venezuela are not isolated events, but a reshaping of hemispheric relationships and assertion of American geopolitical dominance. This view aligns with broader reporting on how Washington has dramatically escalated pressure on Caracas, culminating in unprecedented military and legal actions that have sent shockwaves through global diplomatic circles. A new phase in U.S. Venezuela relations. Over recent years, U.S. Venezuela tensions have deepened amid political stalemates, economic collapse in Venezuela, and international disagreements over Maduro's legitimacy. While U.S. policy historically included sanctions and diplomatic pressure, the situation escalated dramatically in early January 2026. That month, the United States reportedly conducted airstrikes on key Venezuelan locations, ultimately capturing President Maduro and his wife and transporting them to the U.S. to face narcoterrorism charges, a development Washington officials framed as law enforcement, but which many international observers decry as an egregious breach of sovereignty. The impact of this operation is profound. It signals the most significant U.S. military intervention in the Western Hemisphere in decades, raising questions about international law, regional stability, and the future of American influence in Latin America. PLO Lumumba's diagnosis: hegemony, oil, and great power competition. In his commentary, Lumumba situates these actions within a long-standing pattern of U.S. interventionism, where strategic interest in energy resources, especially oil, and competition with emerging global powers, such as China and Russia, shapes policy decisions. He asserts that Maduro's alliance with adversarial states and participation in multilateral groupings, like BRICS, threatened U.S. economic and geopolitical objectives, prompting Washington to escalate its pressure campaign. According to this narrative, the U.S. sought to undermine Maduro through a mixture of covert operations, economic isolation, sanctions, and ultimately, forceful regime change, a culmination of decades-long efforts to limit Caracas's autonomous foreign policy and restructure Latin America's political landscape. How international law and regional orders are being tested. The legality and legitimacy of the U.S. actions remain deeply contested. Critics argue that unilateral military operations and the forcible removal of a sitting head of state violate the United Nations Charter and long-established norms of sovereignty and non-intervention. Many countries in Latin America, as well as global powers such as China and Russia, have condemned the intervention as a blatant example of American hegemonic overreach. Supporters in the U.S. have defended the move as a necessary response to Maduro's authoritarian governance and alleged involvement in criminal networks. However, even some U.S. officials and advisors have expressed concern that such actions, if unchecked, risk undermining the very international order the United States claims to uphold. A watershed moment, or prelude to further conflict. The unfolding Venezuela crisis marks a potential turning point in both U.S. foreign policy and the post-Cold War international system. If the trajectory described by Lumumba and echoed in media reports continues, it may signal a return to power-based politics in the Western Hemisphere, with the United States asserting influence through military might rather than multilateral cooperation. As global responses evolve and legal debates intensify, the Venezuela case and the interpretation surrounding it will likely remain a focal point for scholars, policymakers, and citizens examining the balance between national security, international norms, and the rights of sovereign states.